Hello everyone. Let's begin with the topic sectors of Indian economy. An economy is best understood when you study its components or sectors. So in sectors of Indian economy, you will learn three types of classification of economy. That is primary, secondary and tertiary, organized or unorganized, public or private. To understand this chapter in a better way, try to relate the topics of your daily life. In this lecture, you will also get a better understanding with a few fundamental concepts such as what is GDP, that is gross domestic product, what is employment, etc. Sectors of economic activities. Now, sector defines a large segment of economy in which businesses share the same or related product or services. So, what are sectors? Sectors are basically a large segment of economy in which the businesses share what? A same or related product or services, and that is what your sector. Now, when the produce is a good by extraction and collection of natural resources, it's known as what? A primary sector. Like for example, your farming, your forestry, hunting, fishing, mining, all these are what? All these produce a good by extraction and collection of natural resources. So they make what? They make a sector, and that is called your what? Primary sector. And that is what your primary sector, which is given here. Next is the secondary sector covers activities in which natural products are changed into other forms through ways of manufacturing. It is the next step after your primary. Some manufacturing processes are required here. It's also called your industrial sector. For example, your cotton fiber from plant, we spin yarn and weave cloth. Using sugarcane as raw material, we make sugar or what? Good. Now, what is primary sector and what is secondary sector? Let's understand. So, primary sector is when we need to extract and when we need to collect from natural resources. Like for example, your farming, your forestry, hunting, fishing and mining. All these activities indulge us to actually extract and collect goods from nature as it is. Whereas secondary activities, or you can say secondary sector, is that form of activities which convert these natural resources into a product which we can use with the help of what? Industries and machines. And therefore it's also termed as what? Your industrial sector. What are the examples of it? Suppose cotton. So I'll get cotton from a plant. So I'll get cotton how? By farming it. So farming and collection of cotton is termed as what? Your primary sector. But when I'm actually using that cotton to weave a cloth, then this particular segment of the economy which is actually employed in conversion of my cotton fiber into what? A cloth. That is termed as what? My secondary sector of economy, which is also called what? The industrial sector. Now the thing is that I have actually produced my cotton plant, I have produced cotton and I have converted it into a cloth. Okay, now the thing is that how am I supposed to make people reach out to these cloth, or in fact I would say that how can I make these cloth available for all the people? Now the service which can actually do this job is known as what? The tertiary sector. So what is exactly tertiary sector? Tertiary sector includes all the activities that help in the development of the primary and secondary sectors. These activities by themselves do not produce a good, but they are an aid or support for the production process. It's also known as what? The service sector. For example, your teachers, doctor, washermen, barbers, cobblers, lawyers, call centers, software companies, etc. So this come under your tertiary sector. So let's differentiate once again. Primary sector gives us the products from what? Nature. Secondary sector is going to help us convert those products which we are getting from the nature into the goods or into substances which we can readily use, like for example clothes. And tertiary sector is a sector which gives us what? Services. For example, lawyers and teachers and doctors and cobblers and all those people who are working, like for example in call centers or software companies. So this is what the three sectors of economies are, that is primary, secondary and tertiary. Now, comparing the three sectors. Let's see and let's compare these three sectors. Now, the value of final goods and services produced in each sector during a particular year provides what? The total production of the sector for that year. That is very, very true. If I'm going to see the production in each services in one year, that is going to give me what? The end result which I have obtained after working in that particular sector. And the sum of production in the three sectors gives me what? GDP. So sum of all the production which was done in my primary sector, in secondary and in tertiary, the sum is going to give me what? It's going to give me GDP, that is gross domestic product of a country. Now GDP is the value of all final goods and services which are what? Produced within a country during a particular year. It shows how big an economy is. In India, the task of measuring GDP is undertaken by the central government ministry. Now, GDP is very, very important. And GDP tells me what? GDP tells me that what is actually the total goods and services which are produced in a country in a particular year. Now, the thing is that the total production which is done, it's divided into what? Primary, secondary and tertiary sectors. But should we know what the split is? That is, what percentage of GDP comes from primary, what from tertiary, and what from the secondary. Obviously, it's very, very important. Now, why it's important? It's important because once we know that from where the majority of our GDP actually comes from, we can actually focus more into that area. Like, for example, if my GDP comes maximum from the tertiary sector, so government should utilize more and more money into building a good infrastructure so that the GDP which we have got from the tertiary sector is polished more and more. And if I can see that, okay, the GDP in the secondary sector is doing the poorest. So in the same way, the government should invest more and more into the secondary sector so as to get what? Good results in the secondary sector as well, besides tertiary or the primary. So, this is how, if we know that what percentage of GDP comes from primary, secondary and tertiary, this is how we can utilize the data. So, that's why this data is very, very important. So, now let's see this with the help of a graph. This is the graph which is given. So, this graph basically shows us what? It shows the GDP by primary, secondary and tertiary sectors. Okay. So in 1973 to 74, we can actually see what the percentage of primary, secondary and tertiary was and what was the total GDP. Whereas in year 2013-14, we can see that what is the percentage of primary, secondary and tertiary sectors and what is the total GDP. Okay. Now you can see that in your 2013-14, the majority of GDP comes from what? Your tertiary sector, and the minimum comes from what? Your primary sector. Now, in the year 2013-14, the tertiary sector emerged as the largest producing sector in India, replacing what? The primary sector. Because here you can see in 1973 to 74, the majority came from what? Your primary sector, right? So, I'm so sorry. Okay, replacing what? Your primary sector. Now, the tertiary sector has become important in India because of what? Services such as hospitals, educational institutions, post and telegraph services, police stations, courts, village administrative offices, municipal corporations, defense, transport, banks, insurance companies, etc. All of these are considered what? Basic services and a necessity for all the people. Now, because all these services are considered as basic and because all these services come from the tertiary segment itself, that's why all these things are very, very important, and the government is giving more and more emphasis on all these things, and that is why they are investing more into these, due to which the tertiary sector is actually giving good returns to us. Point number 2 is the development of agriculture and industry leads to the development of services such as transport, trade, storage, etc. This is so very true. If I'm going to invest more and more into farming, then the return, that is the output which I'm going to get from it, is going to obviously increase. And because the production is increasing, like for example, if I have farm of wheat, so I'm investing in good crops, in good manures, fertilizers, even pesticides and all those things, the seeds. If I'm investing more and more, obviously the end product is going to be good. Now, if the end product which I'm getting is good, then what's going to happen? It's very, very simple. that I need more space for its storage. I need transportation so that I can carry the crops which I have produced. I can also do a good amount of trade from it. Okay, so I need what? I need infrastructure for that. I need those services so that I can actually distribute all the crop which I have grown to the people. And all these services, because they come under the tertiary segment, therefore we say that if I'm going to do a good amount of investment in my primary or secondary segment, then I will actually get a good amount of return in my tertiary sector as well. Or you can say I have to, besides the primary and secondary, I have to do the investment in the tertiary segment as well. The third point is with the rise in income, people start demanding more services like what? Eating out, tourism, shopping, private hospitals, private schools, and professional trainings, etc. Point number 4, over the past decade, certain new services based on information and communication technologies have become important and essential. So these are the reasons why the tertiary sector has become so important in India. Okay, the first one is what? The first one is because the services like the hospitals, education institutions, telegraph post, police stations, etc. are becoming more and more crucial. The second is what? That the development of agriculture, or you can say the primary and the secondary sector, leads to what? The development in the service sector. The third point says that with the rise in the income, people obviously demand for more and more facilities and services. And the fourth point is that in the past decade, there has been an increase in the services like your information and communication technology. And because of this, there is a rise in call centers and software companies, etc. So these are basically the reasons why the tertiary sector is doing so great in India. Now we have seen what the primary sector is, what the secondary sector is, and what the tertiary sector is. And we know that the return in tertiary sector as of now is what? The maximum. But do we know that where the most people are employed? Like the return is maximum in the tertiary sector, but do we know that where most people are employed? So where are most people employed? The primary sector. Like, let's read about the primary sector and let's read about tertiary and secondary sector, and let's decide what the answer for this question is going to be. So primary sector. More than half of the workers in India are working in the primary sector, mainly in agriculture. It contributes only a quarter of GDP. And secondary and tertiary sector, these sectors employ less than half the people as compared to the primary sector. These sector produce 4/5 of the products. Now why is this so? This is because of many factors. We can see that more people are employed in primary than in secondary and tertiary, whereas the return which we get from primary is far less than what we get from secondary and tertiary. Why is this? This has so many reasons. Number one reason could be because of unemployment, that because there is no employment, therefore people tend to work in their farms and just work in their fields and all that, and due to that this problem is actually arising. So employment could be one, then illiteracy could be, all right, unemployment could be one, and illiteracy could be that, all right, because they are not educated, they cannot get a better job, and because they are not getting a better job, so they are just working in the primary sector itself. So there can be n number of reasons why people are actually employed in the primary segment, still given the fact that there are a lot of people but the return is very less. Now there is one thing in economics which I would tell you. There is this curve, all right, there is this curve. This curve basically tells me that if I'm going to increase, okay, if I'm going to increase the amount of substances which I'm actually using in my production, then my production for a certain amount is going to increase, but then it's going to decrease. All right, this is a little bit far from the topic, but let me just explain this to you. So what I'm actually going to say is, like, for example, if I have a company and the name of the company is ABC Limited, okay, and I manufacture cosmetics, okay. Now the thing is that for manufacturing cosmetics, suppose I need only 10 people, okay, but to increase the production and to actually then directly or indirectly increase the return, instead of 10 people, I employ what? I increase my employment to what? 12 people. So initially the work was for 10 people, but I increased it to 12 people. So initially, when it was for 10 people, this much work was happening. When I employed two more people, then the amount of work which was done and the return which I was getting also got increased. But then, when instead of 12, I actually employed 14 people, then what happened? The production return which I got decreased. Now, why this decrease come? This decrease comes because, first of all, if there are going to be more number of people, but the work which is there is going to be less, then first of all, those people, have nothing to do, so they can just talk, and they can just kill their time. So that is why the production can also go down. So these are the reasons why we say that it's very, very important that when we are building a company or when we are doing any sort of work, we should have a clear idea as to how many people should be employed and what should be the segment, like how many people should be in design, how many people should be in marketing, so that if there are going to be more people, then there can be the chances for this curve to occur. So this is one thing which you are going to study in economics, but not as of now. I just told you because I wanted you to understand more of this thing, that why it is that in the primary sector there are more people but less amount of return which is there. Though this is one of the reason, and there are so many other reasons, like your unemployment could be one reason, illiteracy could be one reason. So these are all the reasons. You cannot, mention that all right, there are only 5 reasons or six reasons. There could be n number of reasons. So now we know that what is primary sector, we know what is secondary sector, and we know what is tertiary sector, and we also know where the most number of people are employed. Now we know that most number of people are employed in the primary sector, but the return from the primary sector is the least. Then how can we create more employment? Because if we create more employment, then a major section of a people who are actually working right now in the primary sector, they are going to shift towards those jobs which we are going to create. They are going to shift towards that employment which we are going to create. All right, and then this problem could be tackled. So how to actually create the employment? This is the question. Now, employment can be given to people by identifying, promoting, and locating industries and services in semi-rural areas. Every state or region has the potential for increasing the income and employment of people in that area. It can be done by tourism or regional craft industry or new services like IT. A study which was conducted by what planning commission, that is called your Niti Aayog, estimates that nearly 20 lakh jobs can be created in the education sector alone. So imagine if the government is actually spending and creating these 20 lakh jobs, then almost 20 lakh people would be employed, and they might be extracted from what? The primary or the secondary segment and put up in what? The tertiary segment one, that is the teaching one, and we know that the return from the tertiary segment is more than that of the primary or secondary. Now the central government in India made what? They made a law implementing the right to work in about 625 districts of India, and this is known as what? This is known as your Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, that is Manrega, and this was implemented in what? 2005. Now what is Manrega and what happens under Manrega? So under Manrega 2005, all those who are able to and are in need of work in the rural areas are guaranteed 100 days of employment in the year by the government. And if the government fails in its duty to provide employment, it will give unemployment allowances to all those people. So this is actually what Manrega is, and it works in what? 625 districts of India, and it's called what? What is the full form of Manrega? Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which is nothing but Manrega 2005. So this is actually how, like, this is one of the example how the government is actually helping to create more and more employment. Actually, the thing is that you and me people are also helping to create more and more employment. How? Like, suppose there is a doctor, he or she gets graduated, and they open what? A clinic, a home clinic. So when they are opening a clinic, they are actually giving, employment to 10 or 15 more people, or maybe 5 more people under them. All right, they are, nurses, other doctors, and all that cleaning staff, etc. So they are also generating more and more employment. So this is how the government or we the people can actually help create more employment, generate more employment. All right. So this was all about the primary, secondary and tertiary sector. Now let's understand what is organized sector and what is unorganized sector. It's also very important to know what is organized and what is unorganized sector. So let's understand. Division of sector as what? Organized and unorganized sector. So what is organized sector? It's a sector where the employment terms are fixed and regular and the employee gets assured work. And what's your unorganized sector? The unorganized sector is characterized by small and scattered units which are largely outside the control of the government. So this is your unorganized sector. Now, organized sector. They are registered by the government and have to follow its rules and regulations, which are given in various laws such as factory laws, minimum wage laws, payment of, I don't know what this is, shops and establishment acts, etc. It might actually be payment of gratuity act, gratuity act. And in your unorganized sector, there are rules and regulations, but these are not followed since they are not registered with the government. Now the thing is that the organized and the unorganized sector, the names of these sectors itself define what they stand for. Organized sector means everything is organized. You will get leave, you will get allowances, you will get proper employment, a fixed regular wage, and all those you will have terms on that and everything. But in unorganized there is like nothing. You can take an example, like for example, organized sector means you are a government official, like for example you are IAS, and unorganized sector, for example, all those helpers which comes at our place, like for example you can say a sweeper, that is going to be under the category of the unorganized work. So you can just make the differentiation between the two, keeping the two examples in your mind. So organized sector, the job is regular and has fixed working hours. If people work more, they get paid for the overtime by the employer. Here jobs are low paid and are often not regular. Here workers enjoy the security of employment, whereas the employment is not secure at all. People can be asked to leave without any particular reason. Next, people working in the organized sectors get several other benefits from the employer, such as your paid leave, payment during holidays, provident fund, gratuity, etc. There is no provision for overtime, paid leaves, holidays, leave due to sickness, etc. So like this is what the difference between organized and unorganized sector is. And you can clearly see that how well organized the organized sector is and how poorly organized the unorganized sector is, as the name obviously suggests. Alright, people get what they get: medical benefits. The factory manager has to ensure facilities like your drinking water and a safe working environment. When they retire, these workers get pensions as well. Example of organized sectors are your government employees, your registered industrial workers, your Anganwadi workers, your village health workers, etc. Whereas in your unorganized one, there is no such facilities in the unorganized one. Like you do not have any kind of facilities. They may or may not be there. Alright, I'm not saying that 100% they won't be there. They may or may not be there. Okay, but in your organized sector, they will always be there. Examples of unorganized sectors are like your shopkeeping, your farming, your domestic works, your laboring, your rickshaw pulling, etc. So these are the examples of your unorganized sector. Next is how to protect workers in your unorganized sector. Now we have seen that the condition of unorganized sector is very, very bad. So how do we actually protect the workers in the unorganized sectors? Alright, we need to protect them, but what are the protocols and how to actually protect them? Now there is a need for the protection and support of workers in your unorganized sector. Here are a few points which will help in doing so. The government can fix the minimum wages rate and working hours. The government can provide cheap loans to self-employed people. Government can provide cheap and affordable basic services like education, health, food to these workers. The government can frame new laws which can provide provision for overtime, paid leave, leave due to sickness, etc. So as you can see that the condition of your unorganized sector could be made better with the help of what? Government. So all in all, we can say that if the government actually makes certain policies and certain rules, and not only just making is going to work, but if they are abide by, they are actually made to follow in a very, very strict manner, then maybe the conditions of the unorganized sector, or you can say the conditions of the workers who are actually working in the unorganized sector, are going to improve. Now, we have understood that what is primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. We have also understood that what is organized and unorganized sector. Now we are going to go to what was the last one? Come on, the public and private sector. So let's understand what the public and private sectors are. So what is your public and private sector? Public sector. In public sector, the government owns most of the assets and provides all the services. So public is your government, whereas private is for your corporates. So in private sector, ownership of assets and delivery of services is in the hands of private individuals or companies. Railways or post offices, what? It's an example of your public sector. Whereas companies like Tata Iron Steel Company Limited, that is TISCO, Tata Iron Steel Company Limited, that is TISCO, or Reliance Industries Limited, that is RIL, are privately owned companies. Then the purpose of the public sector is not just to earn profit, its main aim is public welfare. Activities in the private sector are guided by the motive to earn profits. So, great. So, in public sector, what they are saying that the motive is to earn profit, whereas in public sector, in private sector, the motive is to earn what your profit, whereas in public sector, the motive is to actually provide public facilities to the people and make them more and more comfortable. So, public welfare is the motive of your public sector, whereas earning profits is the motive of your private sector. So we know that what is it, we know what are the main aims of public or private sector, and we know the examples as well. So this is what your public and private sector is. Now we know that what is secondary, tertiary and primary sector. We know that what public and private sectors are. We know, alright, we know these two things, plus we also know that what are organized and unorganized sectors. Okay, but the last question, there is one more question which is still in my mind actually, and that is what are the responsibilities of the government in all these? We have seen that there are three kinds of categories in which we can actually categorize the economic sectors which are there in India. All the economic activities could be categorized under first, private and public, second, organized, unorganized, and third, primary, secondary, or tertiary. But what is the role of the government here? What are the responsibilities of the government here? Let's see that. So, responsibilities of the government. There are a large number of activities which are primary responsibility of the government. Here we have listed a few of them. Government raises money through taxes and other ways to meet the expenses of services rendered by it. Government have to undertake heavy spending such as construction of roads, bridges, railways, harbours, generating electricity, providing irrigation through dams, etc. All it has to ensure that these services, or you can say facilities, are available for what? Everyone. There are some activities which the government has to support to encourage the private sector to continue their production or businesses. Next, the government in India buys wheat and rice from farmers at what? A fair price, and sell at a lower price to consumers through what? Their ration shops. In this way, it supports what? Both farmers and consumers. Running proper schools and providing quality education, health and education facilities for all are some of the duties of the government. Government also needs to pay attention to aspects of human development such as availability of safe drinking water, housing facilities for the poor, and food and nutrition, taking care of the poorest and most ignored regions of the country. So these are basically what the responsibilities of the government are. I hope you people have understood this chapter. So let's recap. We know that what is primary, secondary and tertiary sector. We know what is organized and unorganized sector. We know what is public and what is private sector. So, with this, we complete this chapter. I hope you people understood it. I hope you enjoyed. Now, you can go to EduRev, just check out docs and tests related to this chapter and just enjoy. Thank you very much.